So let me ask you a question, Tim.
Yeah.
Is there anything indicating rates are going to go down to 5% anytime soon?
No.
In fact, what's more realistic? Like, what is there any indication that rates are going to go down significantly at all? And what do you think would be a indicator that is going to happen, or like what would cause that to happen, or what would cause it not to happen?
So the indication right now is rates are going to continue going up because of inflation and the world economy in general. And Bank of England just raised their rates 0.25 this morning. So it just tells you, world economy. We're not just talking about U.S. Okay, everything's under this inflationary pressure. Now, here's the key. Okay, there will be a time where rates will come back down.
Yep.
And the question is where, 4s, maybe 5s. We don't know. The prediction right now is 12 to 18 months, although I think that's a little optimistic. And the reason for that is threefold. Number one, you guys have already seen this, right? The banks are starting to have some financial difficulties because you raise the cost of funds too high. Federal Reserve raises their money cost too high. It'll cause the banks to require more capital, and in turn, they're not going to make any money. It's like lending money out at 4% and you're borrowing it at 5.5 or 6. You're taking a loss, right? So they're going to have to reduce the rates. Number one, really to keep the banks solvent.
Well, going to have to, you say going to have to, but let me just throw this number out there. Inflation last year, again, everybody has their different way they measure it, but let's just say they said it was 8%. It's only 3% this year.
Sure.
That's a sustainable number because historic inflation is 2.5% a year or whatever. So we've now supposedly capped inflation to keep it normalized. It seems like the only way to do that was to continue to shoot up interest rates. So is there a scenario that says that even though this is decimating the housing market, even though whatever, if you want to go buy a car or a house, you're going to get crushed, that overall this is a good thing because it's keeping the cost of bread at $1.50 for that white bread?
Wow, that white bread's not $1.50 for sure.
Well, the kind that we get is the kind that comes in that blue and white package that has the little squares and it's tastes like nothing. You know what I mean? The generic white bread.
So here's what's happening, Brian. I mean, the government changed the way they describe what inflation was. In essence, you and I both know we go to the grocery store and your cart used to be $150.
So is that like when they changed the definition of a recession, which was what, 3/4 of stagnant or negative growth, and then they changed it to say something else? Yeah, and you're saying they changed the definition of inflation.
Sure.
But either way, did it still curb would inflation be worse without interest rates being sky high?
Would inflation be worse? I truly don't believe it would.
Really?
I think the federal government is trying to squash down. Everybody says it's inflation. Brian, they're trying to suck some of the cash that they just poured into the American economy, right? In 20 and 21 during COVID, they put too much money out there. Now look at the American savings accounts, Brian. What's happening to the average American savings account? Right? All the money's being sucked out. I mean, there's just no way. There's no place around it. Look at people's pensions. Just losing pensions. I mean, Yellow Trucking went out of business, declared bankruptcy Friday. I mean, the oldest trucking industries, right? So what's happening is inflation is still going up. The definition is just not there. They're raising the rates to suck the cash out of the economy. They actually want to squash the housing industry because houses are not affordable. They're thinking that if we can shut things down. But Brian, are there any houses on the market today? I mean, honestly.
I'm going to show you something really quick, and we'll get into that. Let's see. Get to this, and then this.
The suspense is killing me, Brian. I'm just telling you. What do you got? Oh, dude, there you go.
So my buddy John put this up the other day, and you can look at the number of home inventory. This isn't necessarily the number of sales, but the number of houses available to buy.
Houses for sale. Okay, very good.
Yep. Is at historic lows. We're going back to 1983, and there was more than twice as many houses for sale as there is right now.
So you're telling me that in 1983, our population was significantly less, right? And houses were significantly more affordable because you and I both bought houses in 83, 84, $100,000 bought a house, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute because everybody who bought a house in 1983 talks about how, they kind of do that little thing with their head and they're like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
interest rates were 12% when I purchased my house in 1983.
Back in the day, as we always say, back in the
Yeah.
day,
And
interest
it was
rates were
like when
12%.
when America was better and when we were all better human beings and
Yeah,
more responsible. And it was like we had to go uphill both ways.
yeah,
It was like this. The facts are that the cost of the house in comparison to your income was a lot less. It was more affordable. Oh, I was only making $12 an hour. It's irregardless. The
yeah.
cost of a house today compared to the average American income. And you could say the average American income is higher than it used to be. You could make that argument. I'm not a financial analyst, but I do know that the cost of a house now feels burdensome. It felt ridiculously cheap for a minute. I was watching people buy these waterfront houses
Sure.
for less than $3,000 a month, and I'm actually mad that I didn't buy a much bigger house. But
You have a beautiful
I do.
home.
I don't want to complain, but if I was smart, I would have bought, a $600,000 house with a $3,000 mortgage. It would be worth over $1.5 million right now.
Wow.
But in any case, and this also happens to show the number of realtors. I know a lot of realtors watch our podcast here. Like,
Sure.
so and the thing is, like, the number they don't show on here is sales. So I feel like this is a little bit misleading
Yeah.
because there still are houses that are selling. Like, inventory is unsold homes, and I know a lot of these houses are under contract and sold just like that. So
Yeah.
I think the number of sales would be important here, but I think it does definitely demonstrate that if you're trying to buy a house, there's nothing available. So let me just show you this really quick, and this was 11 months ago, so this would have been September of last year. You and I did a video,
Right.
and we said 10% rates. What will happen to the interest? And we were talking about the end of 2026, rates could be 9.55, and the headline was 10% rates, and it actually gave a breakdown of the next 12, 3 years, but the next 12 months, specifically August of 2023, was supposed to be 7.25%. If we're on a trajectory to get to 9.55 by 2026, and again, no one knows the real future, but where are we at today? I just went to Google and I typed in 30-year fixed interest rates, enter, and here's what pops up. 7.9%. So this guy's telling me the other day, he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about selling my house, blah, blah, blah. And like, I try to keep it real with people.
Sure.
Like, I'm like, listen, I'll just be honest with you. You sell your house, you take all that money, you put it down on a new house. He's like, man, well, I got a 2.7%. I only got $1,800. He's like, Bragg, I got $1,800 payment. I was like, okay, but let me just be honest with you. Here's how this goes down. You make 100,000 or 150,000, and you go put it down on a similar size or even a smaller house, and you're carrying a mortgage at 8% interest.
Sure.
That's over 50% higher of a payment only because of the interest alone. Only because, so you buy this, let's say you sell 300,000, you make 300, let's just say that you have a $300,000 mortgage,
Right.
and you go get a $300,000 mortgage from 2.7 to 8, you're going to have more than a 50% higher payment.
Yeah, well, it went from 2.7 to 8, right? I mean, that's almost 3 times.
Yeah.
That's not twice. That's 3 times the payment. What's happened to the price of houses?
That's the other thing. So house prices have gone way up too. So, everybody loves to, the people that are doing the best are the ones that are retiring and they're paying cash for their house somewhere else, or they're not buying a house and they're renting, or whatever. They're selling their vacation houses or their second houses. Those people are making the most money. But the people that have to sell a house and buy a house, it feels great to sell it and make all this money and think, wow, I can't believe it's worth that. And then it's like, okay, now go buy one. And, I'm just like, I don't recommend that you sell and buy a house in order to change your lifestyle. it has to be like, and I think people make that decision based on their own situation, right? No one's going to buy and sell a house like, hey, you know what? I think that I don't like living so close to my neighbor. I'm going to go, this other house here has 3 acres, same house. I'm going to buy my house and sell that one. No, you're not.
You put up a fence.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all there is to it, guys. So Brian, so bring it all in, man. So what's happening? So, we predicted, right? We talked about this, rates being the eights. Dude, we're almost at 8%. And unfortunately, we don't see any relief today. We will probably see relief in, I think, 18 to 24 months now. And I think it's because of the solvency of the banks. I think we are in a recession already. I mean, you buy a cart of groceries. We talked about this. And I don't care what the inflationary gauge says. Look, you buy a cart of groceries, it's twice what you would have paid just 2 years ago, right?
Well, can I say something about that?
Yeah. We're eating too much soy. I know, Brian. We talked about this earlier, man.
Americans are like, do research on soy, guys. Don't drink soy milk. All right, and don't eat a lot of soy. Don't eat any tofu, especially if you're a male. Me and Tim were talking about this, but if you go back 100 years and then go back another 100 and then another 100, and you compare the cost of food to the average income, and I believe what you'll find is not only was the cost exorbitant, but the method in which you got your food, because you probably didn't buy it, you probably traded for it, and you grew it and you raised it. And I would argue that even with the $300 grocery cart, it's a fraction of what food you, and I think that's why we all have air conditioning and houses and cars. And one of the reasons why is because we've created systems that make food dirt cheap, all things considered. Okay. A lot of times you'd work all day, and there's places in this world where you work all day just to get enough food to feed your family for the day or the week. Now I could work 1 hour and buy enough food for days, right? If you eat peanut butter and jelly like Tim does, you know what I mean?
I like peanut butter. So we won't see rates coming down until, from a recessionary standpoint, until the federal government steps in. The bank solvency that occurs, and the banks have a lot of control, a lot of hit on that, right? And the last thing is, of course, we have a presidential election coming in play, and you know what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to turn the economy around to make things look better, feel better, be able to afford housing, right? I mean, it's whether it happens before an election or after an election, it's going to be a big emphasis, Brian. Now, question to you is, where are house prices going?
They're going up. And here's the thing. I would like to say that I believe we are approaching a housing crisis from the perspective of affordability. And I think that at this particular moment in time, it doesn't seem to be on the national radar as far as because I think it's fairly new. It's all happened in the past 12 months. 12 months ago, rates were still at like 5.5. And I was like, oh my gosh, because they were 3 at the beginning of that year. Yeah. But now that they're 8, and that sets in for a while, and the thing is, people don't move every day. They move like once every 5 to 7 years. But let a year or two go by where people that want to move can't move, and you start to build up this frustration of people that are like taking on 8% mortgages. Because I think it was like the numbers like over 60% of people are under 4%.
Yep, and 90% are under 5.
Yeah, and then there's probably 40 or 50 that are under like 4% or something like that. I think I gave that number wrong. I should have said 6 or something. But in any case, like the large majority of people are sitting on these mortgages. But if you allow 5 years to go by and people find that houses are unaffordable, I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the housing something. It's going to make house prices come down. It's going to make something. And I feel like that there is a situation where people haven't computed it yet. I was just at a guy's house the other day. He sold his house already. He did one of these cash deals, and he's going to like Tennessee to pick out a house in Florida, and they didn't make a ton of money on the house. Sure. And they're trying to finance one when they get there. And I didn't want to say anything because I'm not a part of this transaction. I was just a spectator. But I'm thinking in my head, like, bro, you have a huge awakening when you go down there and you're like, oh, I like the blue one, and you try to buy it and you figure out what it costs, and it's like $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought it was going to be $2,000 a month. It's going to be a punch in the head.
It is,
and it's like, oh, you know what? We'll just go rent.
Yeah, even renting it.
Okay, so here's the problem with rent. You better have like tip-top credit to rent a nice house, and you better have like money, because there's no $1,500 rentals. Everybody who ever wants a rental wants $1,500. Let's just stay at $1,000. Okay, well, you better find someone on Facebook to rent you their basement bedroom, because that's what you're going to get. You're not getting a house for $1,000 or $1,500. They're like $225, $300, $3,500 a month.
It's expensive as house. So I saw an article the other day, and they said we don't expect house prices to come down for 7 to 10 years.
What would cause house prices to go down?
Well, the inventory going up.
And what would cause inventory to go up?
A housing crisis? I mean, here's the problem, Brian. Everybody's predicting interest rates are going to go up and housing's going to slow down, but there's such a huge pent-up demand, right?
Yeah, that doesn't mean that prices go down. When you have scarcity of a thing, it makes the value of it go up. It's like, oh, we're going to make the cost of John Deere tractors go down by making less of them. That doesn't make sense. Like it would probably make them be worth more money for people who really want a John Deere tractor.
So, Brian, what are we seeing? We're seeing parents staying in their houses. They're not selling them. They're 2.5. We see the kids moving in with the parents. Yep. Now we've got two incomes, two families living in one house. We're seeing the parents stay in their house longer. I saw an article that said reverse mortgages are going to explode because of the older baby boomers. They got all this equity, but they don't have a lot of savings because they lost, right? They're going to do reverse mortgages, be able to pay the mortgage in full, maybe receive cash, maybe receive payments for the rest of their life.